3 lives, 3 worlds, Lotus steps. Wherever step goes, Lotus blooms. Divine prayer. Lotus Step Chapter 18, Book 2. In the latter half of the night of the Qiqiao festival, Lian San led a group of them back to the mortal world from Mingzi. Changyu doesn't remember exactly how they came back, because she was shaken awake in her sleep and brought back. She woke up for a short while when she just came out of Mingzi and saw in confusion that it was the Imperial Master who was carrying her all the way, and Lian San's was walking in front of them alone. She was confused for a while, then broke away from the Imperial Master twice, ran a few steps forward and hugged Lian San's arm. Her whole face was buried in Lian San's arm, and she didn't see Lian San's expression. Only in her chaotic consciousness, she heard Lian San ask the Imperial Master in a deep voice, "Didn't I tell you to take good care of her?" The Imperial Preceptor was very aggrieved. "It was the princess who suddenly broke away from me. I really didn't expect it and was a little caught off guard." After explaining this, the Imperial Preceptor also put forward some opinions on her behavior. "Does the princess feel that she can't rely on me? Is it safer to be with the general?" After sharing this observation, the master was quite emotional. "The princess is so cautious even in her sleep. It's amazing." The Imperial Master was talking ramblingly, and she yawned, unable to open her eyes. She leaned her head against Lian San little by little, feeling extremely sleepy and confused again. She remembered that she seemed to mutter, "sleepy," and Lian San was a little cold and ignored her. But the next moment, his hand reached out to hug her. After a while, he also picked her up so that she could sleep peacefully in his arms. The next day she woke up in Changqi courtyard. After that, she never saw Lian San in Xushui Garden. Li Xiang inquired about the news, saying that the general had left Xushui Garden and returned to the camp on the outskirts of Beijing to train troops. Changyu was privately disappointed for a while, and that was all. After Mingxi returned, Changyu returned to his usual liveliness, and neither the emperor nor the empress dowager noticed anything. Since that day's bow shooting competition, the court in front of the Minghui Hall in the West Garden has not been sealed. Miss Qi asked Changyu to go to the court to play some new tricks when she had nothing to do. The emperor saw it, and apart from giving them a lesson not to do it under the scorching sun, he didn't restrain Changyu anymore, so she lived a pretty happy life. Ji Mingfeng always came when Changyu played kuju with Miss Qi. At first, she only watched from the sidelines. Later, Miss Qi invited Ji Shitzi to play for half of the game. She was so amazed by Ji Shitzi's skills that she decided to include him in their team. Therefore, Changyu would play with Prince Ji from time to time. After playing polo for 7 or 8 days, Changyu's enthusiasm for the luxurious court in front of Minghui Palace gradually faded, and he missed Lian Sanlai more and more. After waiting for a few days to meet the imperial advisor, she heard that Lian San was unlikely to return to Xushui Garden to accompany him because he was too busy with military affairs. She began to think about sneaking out again. He slipped away 3 times, was caught by the emperor 3 times, knelt down twice, and was imprisoned once. When she came out of the solitary room, it was already past the end of summer, and the heat was gradually fading. The entire palace was preparing for her return to Beijing. She was so happy, thinking that she would be able to return to Shihua Tower and regain her freedom in 2 days. This was a rare opportunity. Anqing stayed for a few days. She thought that Lian San should be back from training and planned to go to his house to find him as soon as he returned to the city. As a result, he bumped into Xiaohua first when he returned to the city. Xiaohua said she had something urgent to do with her. What Xiaohua means is that she has recently fallen in love with a monk, but she also knows that monks who abstain from love, lust, anger, and delusion are unlikely to be willing to be friends with her. She is very depressed and doesn't know what to do. She has been waiting for Changyu to come back. "I want to talk to her and express my feelings and hurts." Changyu listened to Xihua's explanation of her purpose and was silent for a moment. "Don't you like my brother Lian San? I remember last month you told me that my brother Lian San is too good to miss because of his extraordinary appearance." Xiaohua was silent for a moment. "Oh, General Lian. General Lian is already a story this spring, and now it's autumn. Xiaohua looked out the window and gave her a very poetic answer. Every season there's a story for every season. Qingyu didn't quite understand Xiaohua's theory and didn't want to understand. She was just worried about Xiaohua. Because Xiaohua is a demon after all, Qingyu feels that any serious monk's first reaction when seeing Xiaohua is to take her in or suppress her, just like Fahai suppressed by Suzhen. In order to help Xiaohua find her way back, Qingyu took Xiaohua to listen to a small song called Fahai, You Don't Understand Love, for an afternoon. Going to the general's mansion can only be postponed to the next day. As a result, the next day, she went to the general's mansion with full expectations, but still failed to see Lian San. Tianbu came out to greet her and told the general that he was still in the camp on the outskirts of Beijing and did not know when he would return. The next day, the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, the sixth day. Qingyu went to the general's mansion every day to try his luck. Tianbu promised her again and again that if she returned home 3 times in a row, she would immediately report to him that she was looking for him. But even so, for some reason, Qingyu always felt uneasy and insisted on going there every day to take a look. Later, one day, Tianbu sighed with deep meaning. It seems that the princess misses my young master very much. She didn't hear it and sighed honestly. I miss brother Lian San very much. We haven't seen each other for a long time. Tianbu looked at her with a smile. Why does the princess miss my young master so much and want to see my young master? Why is this so? She has never thought about it. Maybe missing him 3 times is the same as missing her relatives. She replied, I just can't see him all the time. I feel a little empty and a little anxious. As she said that, she felt that emptiness again. He was disappointed and said in annoyance, well, since he's not here today, I'll come back tomorrow. He turned around as he said that. But Tianbu stopped her. Princess, wait. When she stopped in confusion, Tianbu looked at her seriously. What if he is not here all the time? Princess, will you come every day? She was a little surprised. Why is he not here all the time? Tianjia, what if? She frowned and thought for a while. Of course I will come, he won't be away forever. Even if there is another war that requires brother Lian San to lead the army, he will need to return to the city to perform the expedition ceremony. At that time, I can always let's meet him. Tianbu was a little helpless. What I said is not. But she did not finish the sentence. She paused, shook her head, and said with a smile, it's nothing. Please forget what I said to the princess today. There was a trace of pity in that smile. I don't know to whom. But Qingyu didn't see it. The time Qingyu went to the general's mansion varied, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes at dusk, but he never went there around noon. In the past few days, Ji Mingfeng invited her to visit the lake and mountains every day. At noon, she almost always followed Ji Mingfeng and wandered outside the city, not in the city. In fact, if Prince Ji had invited her alone, she would have refused, but Prince Ji always brought Miss Qi with him. Miss Qi didn't like to make friends, so it was really rare for her to be so close to Prince Ji. Seeing that Miss Qi was so interested, they invited her, so she went with them. In Chengyu's impression, Ji Mingfeng was a very boring person who liked to stay in the study when he had nothing to do. However, after following him and Miss Qi out of town for a few days recently, she discovered that Prince Ji was also quite interesting. It may not be as good as her, but compared to Dr. Li, who only gambles and goes to brothels to drink wine when it comes to having fun, he is really much better. For example, Prince Ji took them to an osmanthus forest halfway up Zayataitai Mountain. The autumn sun was warm and the fragrance of cinnamon lingered. Prince Ji brought a complete set of drinking utensils and picked mountain plums on the spot to cook wine for them under the osmanthus tree. She and Miss Qi squatted under the tree playing dice and pai gao all day long. Very happy. For example, Prince Ji also took them to a clear stream behind Dayatai Mountain. The autumn breeze brought coolness and the stream gurgled. Prince Ji took water from the stream to cook tea for them and cut down fruit trees to make a fire for them to grill fish. She and Miss Chi squatted beside the fire to grill the fish, playing dice and pai gow, and they were very happy all day long. Happy. For example, Prince Ji also took them to visit a hermit in the mountains. The sky was clear and the mountain birds were singing. Prince Ji and the hermit were discussing mysteries while picking vegetables from the vegetable garden to prepare a vegetarian feast for them. She and Miss Chi squatted beside the vegetable garden and listened to their conversation while playing dice and pai gow, very happy all day long. After running around for a few days, Chengyu felt that it was indeed more interesting to go out with Miss Chi and Prince Ji than to be alone in the city. Miss Chi felt that she was a rough person, but even if she was a rough person, she could tell that Chengyu had something on her mind these days. Naturally, Chengyu was very happy when he played with her, but maybe she didn't notice that she would suddenly become distracted from time to time. Although Miss Chi didn't quite understand what was going on between Chengyu, Lian San, and Ji Mingfeng, she could roughly guess why Chengyu was distracted. These days, Chengyu has been thinking about Lian San. This matter is clear to all bystanders. Miss Chi doesn't know how Lian San treats Chengyu, but Prince Ji is interested in Chengyu at first sight. Chengyu was so stupid that he didn't know anything, so he always mentioned it in front of Ji Shitzi took them to Guilin. Chengyu picked up a field of osmanthus flowers and said that the flowers here were good. She wanted to bring them back to Lian San for him to fill with incense. Ji Shitzi took them to a stream. Chengyu poured a gourd of water from the stream and said that the water here was good. They wanted to take them back to Lian San to make tea for him. Ji Shitzi took them to visit the hermit. And Chengyu also pulled a handful of green vegetables from the hermit's vegetable garden, saying that the vegetables here were delicious, and wanted to take them back to Lian San so that he could try them too. Whenever this happens, Prince Ji feels very sad. Miss Chi somewhat sympathized with Prince Ji and admired him a little. She felt that he was an unusual prince because he could endure being so stimulated. At the same time, she was also curious about how long Prince Ji could endure. The answer is the 8th day. It can be seen that I have endured it for a long time. But even if Prince Ji had an attack, he would do so calmly, probably because he was born with a cold personality. No matter how intense his emotions were, they were like waves under the deep sea. Only he could understand the turbulence and suffering, and others could not see it clearly. He doesn't deserve this from you, Prince Ji said. At that time, Chengyu was chatting with Miss Chi about deer hunting. Miss Chi clearly heard the words Prince Ji, and wisely felt that she should give the stage to the two people beside her. Without saying a word, she silently reined in the horse and walked behind consciously. Chengyu also heard Ji Shitzi's words clearly, but she was silent for a moment, as if thinking for a while, before speaking. Did the prince just say that Brother Lian San is not worthy of me? She raised her head. What Ji Shitzi meant is, what if Brother Lian San doesn't deserve me? The famous horse Qianlabai under Prince Ji's seat moved faster than the blue-eyed peach blossom under Chengyu's seat. He poked out one more head, but he did not look back at Chenyu. It's not worth you always mentioning him, he said. It's not worth it that you never forget to bring him a gift. It's not worth it that you have to go to the general's mansion every day no matter how late it is to find out about him. It's not worth it that no matter when or where you are you. The seemingly calm man, there was finally a hint of depression in his voice, and he seemed to have noticed it himself, so he suddenly stopped here and didn't say any more. Qianli Bai stopped, and the blue-eyed peach blossom walking behind also stopped. Ji Shitzi was quiet for a while, and finally looked back at Cheng. You put him in your heart, but where does he put you? Chenyu held the reins with one hand and rode on the horse. Her face looked calm, but at this time she was a little confused. She feels that whether she goes to Lian San every day or she always remembers to bring something to Lian San, these are trivial matters that are not worth mentioning, because she is also idle when she is idle, and Lian San is not worth the fuss she makes. But why is Prince Ji making such a fuss? She thought for a while and remembered that Prince Ji didn't seem to deal with Lian San very much. Maybe he didn't like that she always mentioned Lian San when she had nothing to do. She nodded and didn't take it too seriously. She held the horse's belly with her legs and urged the blue-eyed peach blossom to walk. Then I understand. I won't mention Brother Lensan from now on. But Ji Mingfeng turned his horse's head and stood in front of her. You don't understand anything. Ji Shixi looked at her for a moment. There were some deep things in his seemingly calm eyes that she couldn't really see clearly, but she heard his voice clearly. He lied to you. He seemed to be struggling a little, but in the end, he said to her again, he lied to you for the third time in a row. Cheng Yu blinked in confusion, and Ji Mingfeng didn't look at her again. It seemed that what he was about to tell her was an extremely cruel thing, so he couldn't bear to look at her expression. He asked her in a low voice, when you went to the general's mansion this morning, did they tell you that Lian San was still not there? This is indeed the case. She went to the general's mansion early this morning. The person who went out to greet her this time was not Tianbu, but a boy she had never seen before. He was a delicate boy, very delicate in appearance and very delicate in speech. He told her that the general was not here and neither was Tianbu. After hearing her answer, Ji Mingfeng was quiet for a while, frowned and said, Lian San went back to his house last night. When you went to visit his house this morning, he was actually there. He raised his hand and rubbed the center of his brow, still not looking at her. I know what you want to say. You are willing to make excuses for all the people who have failed you. You want to say that maybe he is too busy to see you, or maybe his maid forgot to inform him. Tell us about your daily visits. He paused for a moment, as if his next words were unsustainable, but he finally said them out. But after you left this morning, Princess Yanlan took her painting exercises to the general's mansion to ask for advice from him. The princess was not turned away, and then he took the princess to Jiangding building for morning tea. He didn't look like he was not free. Qinyu didn't say anything, and she walked away for a while. She understood what Ji Mingfeng meant, that Lian Song was avoiding her. If Lian San had indeed returned home last night, then it seemed like he was avoiding her. But why? She still remembered the last night she spent with Lian San, and she was obviously fine at that time. Although she had learned from Prince Ji that one person would suddenly hate another person for no reason or reason, she thought it would not be her and Lian San. Lian San was indeed moody and unpredictable at times, but he had always treated her so well, and those kindnesses were true. He would wipe away her tears when she cried and hold her hands when she was in pain. Lian San is someone who would never hurt her. When she came to her senses, she found Ji Mingfeng looking at her. She frowned and unconsciously tugged on the bowstring on her back. The tight bowstring made a slight trembling sound. She raised her head and looked at Ji Mingfeng. Maybe there is really some misunderstanding? The maid did not report it to me. Whether he or the boy misinformed me, maybe he really doesn't know that I'm waiting for him. Ji Mingfeng looked at her quietly. Ayu, he doesn't deserve the kindness you treat him. Yanlan didn't expect that she and Lian San would come to Jiangding building for morning tea today. She had not seen him since the Qiqiao festival, and it had been more than a month. Except for when Lian San was away leading troops, she seldom saw him for such a long time. Therefore, after hearing from the Queen Mother last night that the Emperor mentioned Lian San's return to the palace last night, she found an excuse to come here early this morning, looking for him. On the way, she also thought that Lian San had been camped in the suburbs of Beijing for the whole month. He was probably very busy with business, and she might not be able to see him during this trip. Unexpectedly, when she arrived at the general's mansion, she not only saw someone, but Lian San also took the initiative to take her out for morning tea. At that time, Yanlan felt that he should be in a good mood today. But at this time, Yanlan didn't think so anymore. She was playing chess with 3 pairs in the Jizi pavilion, but after only a few dozen moves, he forced her to surrender. This had never happened before. Naturally, her chess skills were not worth mentioning compared to his, but in the past, he would always put some effort into letting her play, so that she wouldn't lose too badly. After one game, he gave her 24 pieces 3 times in the second game, but she was still quickly defeated by his fierce attack. He didn't want to bother letting her go today. It was still the same in the third game. She was the one who always lost at chess, but she frowned and left the chess table first. Let Tianbu play with you. He said little today, as if he thought playing chess was good, and she was in this room. He and Tianbu both made him upset. Yanlan actually didn't want to play chess with Tianbu, but she didn't dare to argue, so she had to deal with Tianbu while looking at him quietly. The bamboo pavilion in Zaijiangding building faces the green lake and golden willows, giving it a beautiful autumn scenery. A few steps away, Yanlan saw Lian San sitting against the window. He was indeed looking out the window, but he didn't look like he was just sitting around enjoying the scenery. He kept frowning. She was a little uneasy. She wondered what had happened to him today. Why couldn't even the green lake and white water outside the window please him? Or maybe he didn't focus on those beautiful scenery at all? This sequence of events made her feel uneasy. Suddenly there was a noise downstairs. The waiter opened the door and came in to add tea. When the maid asked about it, she found out that it was a group of Kuju teenagers having a banquet on the first floor. The teenagers were so lively, so there was some noise. Hearing the waiter mention the word Kuju, Yanlan suddenly remembered that the last time he and Lian Song came to Zaijiangding building, the same waiter in front of him came to refill their tea. At that time, the chatty servant also introduced them to these folk Kuju teams and the ridiculous disputes between them. She was not interested in these, but she remembered that Lian San listened carefully at that time. Not only did he listen, he also went downstairs to meet a young Kuju boy whom the waiter praised highly. That young man seems to be called the young Master Jade. Thinking of this, Yanlan's heart moved, and she stopped the waiter who was about to leave, and asked softly, "Is it the young master from your Kaiyuanfang who is hosting the banquet?" She thought so, and she was upset for 3 times today. If that Kuju boy is downstairs, bring him along to keep him company. He might be able to please Lian San. The waiter didn't know what she was thinking. He just thought that she was also impressed by the charm of his idol, young Master Jade. He immediately replied to her happily, "The nobles also know about our young Master Jade." He curled his lips again, but downstairs the banquet was not hosted by our young Master Yu, but by the boss of Anlifeng. In the last Kuju competition, we kicked them 15-3 and made them cry. Anlifeng is bent on revenge. Recently, they invited 2 new Kuju masters. We, young Master Jade, are facing a one-on-one challenge, and this banquet downstairs is for the 2 newly invited masters to catch up with each other. When the waiter replied, Yanlan kept secretly looking at Lian Song, but saw that he was still looking out the window and showed no special interest in their conversation. She was disappointed in her heart, and when she spoke to the waiter again, she was a little perfunctory. "My opponent has asked for help, so you young master, you must be very troubled." The waiter smiled and said, "The nobleman is joking. What does our young master have to worry about? There are 120 squares in Ping'an City. Every year, there are not 100 but 80 people who want to challenge him, but it is not that they want to fight with our young master. If you choose, you can win a one-on-one challenge. It depends on whether the young master is willing to accept their challenge." He added, "Our young master generally does not accept such challenges." Yanlan was really a little curious at this time. Why? The waiter scratched his head. "I heard that what the young master meant was that it would be fine if we all played together, but when he met a team that didn't play well, there were 12 people on the other side anyway, so his anger towards them would be dispersed. But 1-to-1, this is too challenging. If that person is too good at playing, what if he can't control himself and hit someone? He will be suspended, so forget it." Yanlan was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "Frivolous." The waiter nodded a little guiltily. It is true that some people say that he is frivolous, but he immediately added firmly, "But our young master is really good at playing football, and he is good looking, so he said this. We only think he is cute. We don't think he is frivolous." Yanlan stopped talking, but the little maid she took out today was very strong-tempered. After hearing the waiter's praise, she was very unconvinced. Our lady said he is frivolous, but he is frivolous, so what if he is good-looking? Besides, how beautiful it can be. Yanlan raised her head and glanced at the maid. The maid immediately shut her mouth, but her eyes were still unconvinced. The waiter turned out to be a person who refused to admit defeat and argued quite seriously. Don't tell me, girl, the whole Ping'an city knows how good-looking our young master is. That villain has not read many books, and he can't describe how good-looking he is. How beautiful. But, he thought for a moment, but recently our young master Yu has made a good friend of an equally handsome young master. They go out together every day. When passing by our building, our shopkeeper actually had it. A very elegant description, saying that when the two of them stand together, they look like a beautiful couple. He concluded happily, so our young master Jade is as good-looking as a beautiful couple. The little maid couldn't hold it back and snorted. A couple means that a man and a woman are a good match, right? She mocked, then which one of them looks more effeminate? That's why your shopkeeper said so? The waiter's face turned red, and he said anxiously, nonsense, although our young master Yu is handsome, he is a man of 7 feet. The little maid seemed to find his angry look amusing. She rolled her eyes and snickered. Then since they are both men of noble appearance, but they're called a pair of beautiful people, it must be because they are both men and they are attracted to each other. But that's enough. The waiter was surprised to see the young master sitting next to him suddenly speak. The little maid, who had been talking nonsense for a moment, was so frightened that her knees weakened and she immediately fell to her knees. The waiter stood aside anxiously, not daring to express his anger. Yaman was stunned for a moment, then Tianbu lowered his eyelashes and stood up from the chess table, saluted her, and without saying anything else, he neatly dragged the little maid who was kneeling on the ground out. Nobles often come to Xiaojiangding Tower. The waiter has seen how a noble gets angry, but he has never experienced this kind of scene. He didn't even know what was going on. He could only vaguely hear a low voice coming from outside. Your young lady is not in good health and has no energy to discipline you. You should discipline yourselves. How can you be so bold? The young lady is still here. What kind of dirty words can be blurted out? It was a kind and gentle voice, but he felt that the tea-house owner was 10 times more vicious when he scolded them, but the little maid kept crying and begging for mercy as if she was extremely scared. The waiter didn't know that the rules of a wealthy family like the princes and nobles were so strict. He was shocked after seeing it today. At this time, neither of the nobles asked him to leave. He didn't dare to leave at will. Even if he was shocked, he could only able to stay in place tremblingly. After a while, he heard the young lady at the chess table tentatively say, "Are we too noisy?" which upset His Highness. She then defended herself softly. "I thought that young Master Jade was an acquaintance of your Highness. His Highness is willing to listen to us talking about him, but he doesn't know that it will make His Highness even more upset." The young man sitting by the window did not answer, but stood up. "I'm going out for a walk." He boldly raised his head slightly and saw the young lady biting her lip and reaching out to hold the young man's sleeve as he passed by the chess table. She raised her eyes slightly. Her reddish eyes were extremely beautiful and endearing, and her voice was also very gentle. "I'll go with your Highness, okay?" Chang Yu didn't think Ji Mingfeng would lie to her and couldn't think of why he would lie to her, so Ji Mingfeng said that Lian Song went back to his house last night, and this morning he took the 19th Princess Yanlan to Shaojiang East Building for morning tea. She thought it should all be true. However, Ji Mingfeng guessed that Lian San was avoiding her. After thinking about it, she felt that this must be a nonsense, and she immediately drove back to the city. She patiently explained to Prince Ji, "I think the young man misinformed me this morning. Look at Brother Lian San. He has been staying at the camp in the suburbs of Beijing for a month. It seems that he is really busy. Maybe he only has this half day. I have time, and I have to go back to the camp in the afternoon, so I have to go back quickly." As she said this, she sincerely envied Yanlan. Oh, Yanlan is so lucky. She happened to catch up with Brother Lian San when he was free. I am not so lucky. I can only try my best to see if I can meet him once I return to the city. Prince Ji was obviously shocked by her strange way of thinking when facing this matter. He had nothing to say for a moment and his face looked very ugly. Miss Ji could completely understand Prince Ji, sympathized a little with Prince Ji, and wanted to give Prince Ji some help. All 3 of them were riding good horses, so they returned to the city only at the beginning of noon. The blue-eyed peach blossoms carried Cheng Yu straight to Xiaojiangding Tower. She was originally focused on clearing the road and running quickly, but for some unknown reason, when she turned from Jiang Street into Jiangdong Street, she was distracted and glanced at a deep alley on the left. A white figure came into view. It was a shame that Blue Eyes Peach Blossom ran so fast. By the time she reacted and tightened the reins, the horse on her hip had already carried her to the outside of 3 or 4 shops. She didn't know what she was thinking at that time. The blue-eyed peach blossom fell off it before it could stop, so she fell, but she didn't care at all. She got up and ran towards the alley. When she rushed to the alley, she froze at the entrance of the alley and did not go in. The alley is narrow, sandwiched between 2 ancient buildings. Even if the autumn sun is high today, the sunlight only reaches half of the wall. The path of broken bluestones is hidden in the shadow that cannot be touched by the sun and extends to the far end, making the whole alley look particularly deep and quiet. A few feet away, the young man in white who had just given Cheng Yu a startling glance stood in this deep darkness. She didn't admit the wrong person, it was indeed Lian San. But he was not alone in the alley. He also held a girl in his arms. It was a horizontal hug position, with one hand holding the girl's knees and the other hand supporting her back. The girl's hands were properly wrapped around his neck, and she pressed her face against his as if she was very attached. His chest. Therefore, Cheng Yu couldn't see the girl's face clearly, but judging from the material of her shirt and skirt, she felt that it was probably the 19th Princess Yanlan. It is indeed Yanlan. But Yanlan didn't notice Cheng Yu. She just came out of Xia Jiangding building, and she walked with Lian San all the way. Because Lian San was in a bad mood today, she felt a little distracted following him. However, when the sound of horse hooves suddenly sounded on the street, she still heard it, but before he could react, Lian San was picked up from the wheelchair and rushed into an alley next to the jewelry shop. In an instant, she could only guess who Lian San was hiding from, but who was he hiding from? From the moment he hugged her, she had no intention of exploring or caring. Cheng Yu stood at the entrance of the alley, her eyes lingering on Yanlan for a long time, and she frowned unconsciously. Suddenly, all Lian Song's excitement turned into a brick of ice in an instant, pressing down on her heart without warning, a little cold and a little heavy. She had known that Lian Song was Yanlan's cousin, so she was not surprised that Lian Song would take Yanlan out for morning tea, but she never thought that they were such close cousins. Because she was not close to her cousins. It turned out that Lian Song had another sister whom he would care for and care for. She thought that he was holding Yanlan now, just like he had held her on countless occasions in the past. Does that mean that when Yanlan cries, he will also wipe away her tears? He would also hold Yanlan's hand when she was in pain? She felt suddenly angry. But she knew how to introspect herself, so she immediately understood that there was no reason for her anger. Lian Song was looking at her. Although they were several feet away and the bustling street was behind her, she felt silence when her eyes met his. The phoenix eyes that were slightly raised at the end seemed to be looking at her seriously, but she didn't see any expectation in those eyes. Just like he never expected to meet her here, or never expected to meet her again. The indifference in his eyes made her feel a little flustered. Is it because they haven't seen each other for a month that he is unfamiliar with me? She immediately found a reason for him and took 2 steps forward, hoping that the uncomfortable feeling of separation would be eliminated by getting closer. But when she took the 3rd step, she saw his eyes suddenly looking away. She stopped, and the ice bricks pressing on her heart became heavier. She didn't understand why he was like this. She hesitated and wanted to call him, but she saw that he frowned as if he had guessed her intention. Just before she spoke, he turned around, as if planning to leave. She was stunned, and while she was stunned, she heard a very slight ringing of a bell. She looked over absently and saw a rusty old wind chime hanging on the eaves of the ancient building on the left. A gust of wind blew by, and the wind chimes rang cheerfully, but because of their old age, the sound was very melancholy. Lian San hugged Yanlan and left at this moment, and in an instant his figure had disappeared at the end of the alley. The alley soon became deserted, leaving only the gentle sound of wind chimes in the air. Qingyu stood there, her face a little pale, like the melancholy sound of old wind chimes knocking on her heart, finally breaking the ice brick pressing on her heart, and those tiny ice particles flowed along the blood. Her limbs were covered with bones, and after a moment, she began to feel uncomfortable. Chengyu felt uncomfortable alone for a moment, but still went to the general's mansion after lunch. Because after she calmed down and thought deeply, she found no reason to be angry with Lian San. Indeed, he ignored her, which made her unhappy. But she also thought that maybe Lian San and Yanlan had some serious business just now. For example, Yanlan also had some knots in her heart and needed Lian San to help her resolve them. At this time, it was really cool for her to step forward and disturb her. The more she thought about it, the more she thought it was possible, because Yanlan was a princess who had lived in the imperial city since she was a child, and people who lived in the palace all year round were more likely to have psychological problems, like the Empress Dowager, and even the Emperor. Everyone there is more or less something wrong with it. But the problem is that even after she figured it out, the pain in her heart didn't diminish by half. She vaguely thought of the reasons, but immediately threw away the reasons that flashed in her mind, because she felt that she was not that ridiculous. At the general's house, Tianbu still came out to greet him, and Tong Qinyu explained that Lian San had indeed returned to the house last night, but the 19th princess was at the house at this time, because he had an appointment with the 19th princess, so it is inconvenient to see her today. He also conveyed Lian San's message, saying that if Qingyu had something urgent, she could come back to him tomorrow. However, he was a little busy these days and didn't have much time. If she had nothing urgent, she didn't have to go to the house to wait for him every day. Qingyu's heart skipped a beat. She was quiet for a while and said to the sky, "Brother Lian San, he thinks I'm a little clingy, doesn't he?" Tianbu looked a little surprised, but he only said, "Young master's meaning. I don't dare to speculate on it." Chengyu coughed. "Oh, then, please help me tell Brother Lian San that I am not here at this time." She said against her will, "I don't necessarily want to see him or anything. I was just on the street, I happened to see him, and then stopped by to say hello." She tried to act casual, but couldn't suppress the loneliness in her voice. "But since he has other guests, then forget it." Tianbu looked at her a little worriedly. She rubbed her nose with her index finger to cover up the grievance that suddenly surged into her heart, and pretended to be normal and said, "Since he is busy, I won't come over these days." But Tianbu suddenly asked her, "What happened to the princess's hand?" She was stunned for a moment, looked at her left hand, and found some spots on the cuff. Pulling her sleeves down a little, she took a breath and felt the pain. She found that she had a big scratch on her forearm. Maybe it was because the cloth had scratched the blood scab when I pulled on the sleeve, and the wound started to bleed again. Tianbu immediately stretched out his hand to check her wound, but she quickly took a step back and rashly put down her sleeves to cover the terrible scar. After thinking about it, she explained, "Maybe I didn't pay attention and fell just now. Just a fall, it's nothing." He pretended to be cheerful and said, "Sister, please go back and revive Brother Lian San." "I'm going back too." After saying that, he turned around conveniently. There is a huge red leaf tree near the lake in the inner courtyard of the general's mansion. There is a stone table under the tree, and 3 people are sitting at the stone table carving a jade piece. Yanlan was playing the piano in the lake pavilion not far away. Tianbu didn't know much about the music of the mortal world, so he didn't hear what kind of music she was playing. He only felt that the tune was sad, which made people feel a little depressed. When she got close to Lian San, Tianbu hesitated a little. She wasn't sure whether Lian San wanted to hear her reply about Qingyu immediately or not. After hesitating for a moment, feeling that she could not figure out what Her Highness was thinking at this time, she went to get him a cup of hot tea in silence. Lian San has not touched the newly replaced tea, he only focused on the carvings in his hands. It was a piece of white jade with red sheen on the top. I carved it into a pair of cross-necked cranes 3 times, and the red sheen naturally became a little red on the top of the crane. Although it was only half carved, the spirituality of the cranes was ready to be revealed. Tianbu was waiting on the side, and it wasn't until Yanlong caressed the 3 pieces of music that he heard Lian San ask her, "How is she?" Tianbu said softly, "The princess is a sensible princess." After listening to the slave, she did not embarrass the slave and went back on her own obediently. "Okay," Lian San said calmly, still focusing on the jade piece in his hand, carefully carving the crane feathers of the crane on the right, as if he just asked a casual question, but actually didn't care what Tianbu answered him. "But the princess doesn't look good." Tianbu considered it. Then Lian San paused for a moment, but it was only for a brief moment. The carving knife once again cut across the jade surface neatly, and there was another white stroke of crane feather. Tianbu whispered, "She thought that your highness didn't like her being too clingy to you, so she asked me to tell his highness that she is not that clingy. She just happened to meet you on the street today, so she stopped by to say hello." The song of smoke in the lake pavilion ended, and the courtyard became extremely quiet for a moment. Under the red leaf tree, you could only hear the faint sound of the carving knife in Lian Song's hand cutting across the jade surface. Tianbu continued, "But I don't think that is true." She lowered her eyes and said, "She was panting and sweating profusely when she came. She seemed to have run in a hurry. Maybe she accidentally killed her while chasing his highness back to the house. Her arm was injured and half of her sleeves were stained with blood, but she didn't notice it. It wasn't until the slave told her that she felt pain, but she just frowned." She paused, but when the slave said that his highness couldn't when I saw her, she looked like she was about to cry. The jade fell on the stone table and broke into 4 pieces. Tianbu suddenly raised his eyes and saw that the sharp carving knife had pierced the palm of Lian Song's hand, probably quite deeply. When the carving knife was pulled out and thrown aside, blood immediately gushes out from the wound and drips onto the stone. On the table, broken jade was dyed bright red. Tianbu let out a soft cry and quickly took out the handkerchief from his arms and handed it over, but Lian San didn't take it. He just sat there and looked at his palm expressionlessly. For a long time, he tore off a piece of his sleeve at will, wrapped the injured area hastily, raised his head, and said to the sky, "Bring another jade here." It was as if nothing had happened. Chang Yu kicked the pebbles all the way back. She didn't eat anything at noon, but she didn't feel hungry. When she passed by a herbal tea shop, she suddenly felt a little thirsty and bought a cup of herbal tea. The herbal tea shop was doing a good job today, and all the tables were full of people. She didn't show any particularity, so she sat on the street for a while holding tea. She sat there sipping her tea and sighing. She was so disappointed in herself. When Tianbu told her that Lian San couldn't see her because of Yanlong, she finally understood that she was really that ridiculous. She was jealous of Yanlong. A large part of the reason why she felt uncomfortable and unhappy today was because she suddenly realized that Lian Song seemed to treat Yanlong better than he treated her. But this jealousy is actually unreasonable because Yanlong is Lian Song's blood cousin. They have known each other since childhood, and it is understandable that they have a deeper relationship. It is natural that Lian San treats Yanlong better. Although she calls Lian San's brother, he is not really her brother. If one day he no longer wants her to be his sister, she will be nothing to him. In fact, she has never been able to compare with Yanlong. When she realized this, she suddenly felt a chill in her heart, so after drinking the herbal tea, she asked for a cup of hot tea to warm herself up. After drinking tea, she kicked the stones and walked back all the way. When she saw the Shirhua Tower in front of her, she remembered the scratch on her arm and turned back to Dr. Li's hospital. She often got bruises here and there when playing football, so Dr. Li didn't ask much. But Dr. Li is a man who has seen a lot of things. A missing arm or leg is not considered an injury in his eyes. Therefore, after bandaging Qinyu's wound, he saw her sitting there in a daze as if she was quite idle, and asked her to help copy 200 prescriptions. Qinyu felt that Xiao Li was really inhumane, but she was also very sorry for Xiao Li because she was thinking about her thoughts while copying the prescriptions, and as a result, not one of the 200 prescriptions was copied correctly. When the sun set, Xiao Li came to check the results of her help. He wanted to beat her to death, but after noticing her expression, Xiao Li restrained himself. After calming down, Xiao Li sat next to her and asked her if she had anything on her mind. She nodded and muttered, "That's right." She and Xiao Li were friends who talked about everything, but she felt that it was inappropriate for her to be jealous of Lian San's cousin. Xiao Li would definitely think that she was crazy, so she did not talk to Xiao Li in detail. The meaning of. Xiao Li sighed with emotion. "Oh, we, Au, have reached the age where we have things that we can't share with me." Cheng Yu frowned and looked at him. "You are only 2 years older than me." Dr. Li was very confident, "But Huajiu drank many more meals than you did." Cheng Yu was unconvinced. "Not necessarily." Xiao Li thought for a while. "You go to a brothel to ask an oiran to make hot pot, or the oiran of a brothel goes to Shawalu to ask you to make hot pot. It doesn't count as drinking flower wine." As he spoke, he led her into the wine cellar of Renantang, generously brought 2 jars of good wine to her, and gave her guidance arrogantly, saying that when people grow up, it is easy to have worries, but there is no such thing as drinking. 2 jars of strong liquor can still be poured out. If there is any, Xiao Li brought 2 more jars of wine to her and said, "Then drink 4 jars." Thinking of Cheng Yu's usual drinking capacity, he felt that 4 jars were not very safe. "I simply gave her 2 more jars to make up 6 jars. She was very satisfied and said that she should give 6 as a gift. He also told her that Zhu Jin went to the village to collect rent today and would not come back until tomorrow. She could do whatever she wanted tonight. So that night, Cheng Yu was free to express herself, and then she got drunk. Cheng Yu's problem is that when she gets drunk, she likes to climb high. Last time she drank the 3rd cup of drunken breeze at Zijianding Tower, she climbed to the top of a century-old tree outside the building, because that tree was the tallest within 100 feet. This time, she drank the 3rd bottle of liquor that Xiao Li gave her. She climbed up to the main ridge of the 10th floor of the Shihua building, because this building was the tallest within 100 feet. She sat dizzy on the roof with her feet crossed. She had almost forgotten all the troubles during the day. She just felt that it was so refreshing to sit so high that she could almost overlook the entire Pingan city. At the same time, the wine Xiao Li gave her was so delicious. Xiao Li was such a good friend. She sat on the roof and drank till the bottom of the wine jar was reached. She did not expect for a moment that there were 3 jars downstairs. She saw a few children on the street not far away holding lanterns and playing chasing shadows. She thought it was very interesting and threw them away. The wine jar jumped up and down on the roof chasing its own shadow. She has been playing kuju since she was a child and has excellent balance. Therefore, although she looks like she is about to fall down with every step she takes, she is always able to steady herself. She played by herself for a while, and when her eyes passed over the juju venue downstairs, she caught a piece of white clothes looming behind the trunk of the towering ancient locust tree next to the juju venue. This is not the flowering period of the locust tree, and it should not be the clothes of the ancient locust tree. Her eyes were fixed on that place, and a thick cloud suddenly blocked the moonlight, and the white clothes quickly disappeared into the darkness. When the thick clouds moved away and the moonlight reappeared, there was nothing. If she hadn't been drunk, Cheng Yu would have suspected that she was dazzled, but she was drunk after all tonight. Drunk Cheng Yu didn't doubt his eyes at all. She stood on the edge of the roof and thought for a while, then turned around and pointed her right leg towards the void without tiles. She placed her right hand on the palm of her left hand and tapped the beat to encourage herself. 1, 2. 2. She closed her eyes when the words came out, stepped on the air with her right foot, and fell out. In Cheng Yu's imagination, she should be like a wounded white bird, suddenly falling into the night wind. But the person's movement was faster than she expected. Although her right foot landed in the air and she lost her balance, the person caught her before her left foot could leave the eaves. The vague fragrance of white chinensis comes from the tip of the nose, just like the moonlight tonight, quiet, and a little cold. Sure enough, it was 3 in a row. Cheng Yu smiled. Before he could open his eyes, Lian San had already held her and stood firm on the eaves again, and then he let go of her. "What are you doing?" The voice was also like the moonlight above the head, bringing with it the coolness of the autumn night. And that was a rebuke. But her drunken brain did not receive the anger contained in his voice. She was just purely happy to see him, so she happily shared with him, "Oh, I guess it's Brother Lian San. There, I thought if it were you, you would definitely catch me, and I would jump off." She looked at him without any shame. Her eyes fell on his frowning eyebrows, then moved to his eyes, and finally she saw his solemn expression clearly. He also looked at her, his amber pupils devoid of any warm emotion. It was cold, not looking forward to seeing her Lian San. Everything that happened during the day suddenly came back to her mind, and grievances and confusion suddenly came to her mind. She was stunned for a moment, and suddenly she became sad. "Why does Brother Lian San get angry when he sees me?" He did not answer her question, but frowned and said, "You are drunk." "I'm not drunk," she said immediately, but after thinking that she had drunk a lot of wine, she pointed out 3 fingers and said, "Well, I drank 4 jars." She emphasized again, "But I'm not drunk." But suddenly he softened. He stretched out his hand to support her and helped her stand firm again. She carefully discerned the expression on his face. "Brother Lian San, don't you want to see me?" He still didn't answer her question, but said, "What if it wasn't me?" Although she didn't want to admit it, she was indeed drunk. But even though she was drunk, she reacted quickly and immediately understood what he was talking about. "There are 10 floors in Sherwa Tower." She pointed to a moon-watching platform protruding from the 7th floor and answered him. "Easily. Then I will fall to the platform. It is not high enough and I will not fall to my death." "Yeah?" Her mind was clearer than before, so she was keenly aware of the coldness in the voice. She raised her head in confusion and met his equally cold gaze. He looked at her coldly. "As long as you don't fall to death, it doesn't matter if you break your limbs, right? I thought you had grown up and become sensible." She was quiet for a while and whispered, "You are angry." Suddenly she raised her head and looked at him very sternly. "Why do you get angry when you see me?" It seemed that she remembered what made her sad again, but because he changed the topic as for the important issue that she had temporarily forgotten, she looked at Lian San angrily and sadly. "Don't be angry when you see Yanlan," he said calmly, "because she doesn't make me angry." After hearing his answer, she seemed to cry immediately. "Is Yanlan better than me?" He looked at her quietly. "Why do you want to compare with her?" She shook her head and did not answer him. Maybe she didn't know why she shook her head. She just felt a little tired, so she sat down, thought for a while, and covered her eyes. "Then you think she is better than me?" She did not cry, but her voice was very soft and tired, and then she was sad. He sighed and said, "Let's go." She thought he would leave immediately. She also felt that he didn't want to see her at all tonight. Why didn't he want to see her? She also asked the reason because she always made him angry. Therefore, the answer to his attitude during the day was that she must have annoyed him. Occasionally, she wasn't thinking very well tonight, so she couldn't remember what she had done to displease him, but he was always smarter than her, so whatever he said was what he said. She didn't know how to recover, but she just felt heavy. She blamed herself for remembering those unhappy things. She had already forgotten them, and she felt very happy when she forgot them. She waited for him to leave, but the expected footsteps never came. The huge moonlight illuminated the entire Pingan city. It was already late at night, and the entire city was quiet. Only the streets in the distance were still lit with faint lights, like stars falling from the night. The wind became quieter, but it was still cold, and it made her sneeze as it swam past her. Something was handed to her. She raised her eyes and looked over, but it was a white coat. "Put it on." The young man who was supposed to leave looked down at her. She glanced at the clothes in his hands and then at him. Then she turned her head. She ignored him and only stared at her shadow at her feet. He paused, then sat next to her, and the coat was draped around her shoulders. She turned her head in surprise, just enough for him to hold her right hand and pass it through the unfolded sleeve. She was stunned and let him put on his coat for her like taking care of a young child. She sat there in a daze, not knowing how to react. Finally, she felt that she should have some backbone, so she struggled to take off the shirt that he had already worn neatly, but he stopped her. "Don't be willful." He frowned. She had heard enough of his accusations tonight, so she didn't care. She had the courage to mutter to him, "I just want to be willful, and you can't control me." She struggled even more fiercely. He suddenly said, "It's my fault." She blinked, and he pulled the shirt she had half taken off half back up and closed it, looked at her and said, "It's my fault." Her eyes suddenly turned red. She bit her lip hard and said loudly, "It's just you who's not good." But she didn't insist on taking off the shirt anymore. She lowered her head and rolled up her sleeves. After rolling them for a while, she began to enumerate his crimes. "You ignored me, you didn't see me, you were cruel to me, and you said Yanlan was better than me." Too fast and too angry, choking on myself. Liansong's hand immediately touched her back. He seemed a little helpless. "I didn't say that." She recalled it, but her mind was confused and she couldn't remember what he just said, so she nodded. "Oh, that's not what you said." But the impression that Yanlan was better than her made her sad for a while. She asked Liansong with red eyes, "Is Yanlan as good-looking as me?" But without waiting for his answer, she shook her head decisively. "I think not as good-looking as me at all." He asked him again, "Is Yanlan as smart as me?" Still not waiting for his answer, he shook his head decisively. "I don't think he is as smart as me at all." Asked him again, "Is Yanlan considerate of me?" This time she finally gave him time to answer, but he didn't answer. He just looked at her. His face was finally no longer cold, but it was perfect. She couldn't understand what was contained in the appearance. She had never understood Lian San, so she didn't care. She just thought, "Oh, he didn't want to answer this question." She thought about it for a while, but she was not so confident about being considerate, so she said hesitantly, "Then, I think we might be equally considerate." She wanted to ask more. "Yanlan has me." But she shook her head in annoyance. "Forget it." When she calmed down, he held her hand. "You don't have to compare with her." But this didn't seem to comfort her. She lowered her head and looked at the hands held by him. After a long time, she whispered softly, "Actually, Yanlan can play the piano, sing, and draw very well. Those things she can do, I'm not very good at it." She sniffed hard and mustered up the courage to confess to him, I'm very shameless. The reason I don't like Yanlan is because Yanlan is actually a good sister." "So what if she is a good sister?" he asked her. She suddenly threw herself into his arms, her arms tightly wrapped around his shoulders, her face pressed tightly against his chest, and she choked out the deepest fear in her heart, "Because I'm afraid I am no longer your unique person, and I am afraid that sooner or later you will leave me." For a moment, Lian San held his breath. He couldn't remember that there had ever been a person in this world who could make him lose his mind and become confused with just one word. For a long time, he closed his eyes. But he didn't respond to her hug. Yes, he will leave her sooner or later. So she needs to get used to it sooner. Tonight had gone too far and it wouldn't do her any good to go on like this. He shouldn't have come to this place tonight, or even if he came, he shouldn't have appeared in front of her, or even if he appeared in front of her, he shouldn't have given her the illusion of being close to her. Or even if he couldn't control himself and got close to her, there was no way he could return this hug. This had to end here. He held her arm and wanted to push her away, but at this moment, she raised her head. So close. He held his breath again. She seemed to be about to cry. The tips of her eyebrows, the ends of her eyes, and the tip of her nose were all dyed red like cherry blossoms. It was a soft, fresh, and sad red that was skillfully dotted on her snow-like skin. It's impossible to look away. There is a kind of lotus in the Yaoqi called dancing concubine. Its whole body is snow-white, with just a touch of delicate red dyeing on the edge of the petals. At this moment, she looks exactly like that kind of flower. There were tears in her dark eyes, containing loneliness and sadness, just like the deepest part of the sea of brilliance. Her eyebrows and eyes were full of emotions, which meant she was sad and begging for mercy, but there was no expression on her face, and she instinctively maintained her self-esteem. She just looked at him like that. She didn't often look like this, or she didn't realize that she looked like this at this time, but the sad beauty and the equally sad weakness made him almost irresistible. But he finally pushed her away before giving in. But he forgot about her stubbornness. Before he could react, she hugged him again. There was a soft sound from the corrugations under him, and he was pressed under her in his absence. In a hurry, her lips brushed across his cheek. They were cold lips, but it was like a spark burning across his face. He suddenly looked at her, but she didn't notice. She held his chest with one hand and put the other on his shoulder. She still didn't cry, and there was still no expression on her face, but she bit down hard. Lips, looking at him stubbornly. "Brother Lian San, you are not allowed to leave, we haven't." He grabbed her collar and pulled her down, then he kissed her lips. He felt her body suddenly stiffen, but this time, he did not let her go. His left hand clasped her waist, causing her body to press tightly against him, which made her unable to resist, but she did not resist. He thought she was petrified, but she couldn't speak because her lips were blocked by him. He kissed a little hard, so the red but cold lips quickly became warm and soft under his lips and tongue. There was the scent of wine between her lips and teeth, but more of the scent of flowers. As the passionate kiss deepened, the floral fragrance suddenly became stronger, and she gasped instinctively. All she got was that he bit her lips harder and entangled her lips and tongue. Under his lingering kiss, her stiff body relaxed, and the sad, cherry blossom-like red on her face became brighter, and even her whole face was pink, like a hibiscus flower emerging from the water. Under his palm, he could feel her body heating up little by little. The only sane thing in her body seemed to be her eyes, which were full of tears, as if there was a heavy fog, filled with confusion and trembling. She was drunk, and he took advantage of her. He stopped abruptly. The moonlight shone quietly on them, on the silvery roofs, on the nearby trees, on the streets, on the distant market. The lanterns in the distant market were also extinguished. The whole city fell into sleep. Tangqi didn't know if she had also fallen into a dream. She stood up from Lian San in a daze and touched her red and swollen lips with her fingers, touching her heart. Her eyes were full of shock. "Why, I don't got it," she murmured softly. She didn't understand what was going on. Can't blame her. She was drunk tonight, and she might not be able to control the situation when she was sober, let alone her current situation. She looked at Lian San. He was still lying on the corrugations. Her third brother Lian San was always so firm and reliable, but now he looked at the silver moon in the sky, and there was a hint of vulnerability in his expression. After a long time, he said, "I don't understand either." But, he whispered, "You don't have to understand." "Why?" "Because," he closed his eyes, "this is just a dream. All of this, when you wake up tomorrow morning, you will forget everything." End of Lotus Step Chapter 18, Book 2. By Tangqi. English translated using Google.